Hello and welcome to this episode of Midday Mentors. It's great to have you with us today, Ket Patel. Really looking forward to our chat where we're going to talk about not so much a day in the life of a change management professional, but what they do day to day, which is similar. But I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Estelle. Yeah, and it's great to be here doing this series. My name is Ket Patel, as you'd already said. I'm a business change consultant. I work on an associate basis, which is really to say that I work with multiple kind of consultancies and therefore multiple clients. But I am sort of a one-man band, if you like, kind of taking my experience from other projects and helping organizations. I love the job I do, working closely with sort of clients and project teams to kind of deliver change better for organizations.
And how did you get into change management? What made you decide to come into change management, Ket?
But it's a pretty varied path, if I'm honest. I studied mathematics at university, and I was really conscious I wanted to use that kind of analysis side of it to apply it to business. So I actually started off in sort of data and sort of operations work. And what I found very quickly in all of that work was that there was this element of constant change and pivoting, if you like, to kind of demands. And it wasn't always handled particularly well. And there were really some of the soft stuff around that kind of what is it that people need? Why do they need it? Why is there the urgency? We kind of didn't do so well, but the projecty stuff, like when would it get done, who's going to do what when, those bits got really well done, and it piqued my interest a little bit because I was quite interested in what motivated people, and so that kind of became a bit of a theme for work I would do. I kind of understood the project elements of the work, but I didn't quite see enough of the kind of people elements of what we were doing, and actually I kind of moved from an operations role into a projects role. I then moved into kind of working on larger and larger projects where it was involving more and more people change. But again, really focused on projects that were really process oriented. What's the timeline? What are the activities? Who's doing which ones? Not the kind of impact they had. And so what I often noticed is that people didn't really engage with them as well. So you can show them a timeline and you see the impact. So I got a real interest at that point when I was doing bigger projects and you weren't seeing the outcomes you're expecting to have in this area of sort of making the change more acceptable to people. But I didn't actually know it was a profession. Believe it or not, sort of 10 years ago, I was still very much wedded to project management. And it was only when a colleague of mine kind of said, you're actually a really good change agent. And I looked up the word change agent, and I all of a sudden started to meander into this path of change management. And it was a bit of a light bulb moment for me then, that this is actually a profession and other people might be out there doing it. So yeah, that's how I kind of found it, and I've been doing it ever since. Like really focusing on that people side of projects and understanding what it takes to get them to change their behaviors, to engage with the plans you have, and actually accept some of the things that you think are needed for change to happen.
That's really interesting. And are you finding that you're using any of that data interest and analysis and mathematics in change, just out of interest, Ket?
I try to use it as much as I can. I think one of the things that interests me with maths is the kind of logic aspect of it. So there's everything can be evidence-based to some extent. Decisions you choose to make have an outcome, and you can, if you're planned, you can measure that outcome and you can see if it meets up with what you're expecting to happen. So I do actually try to think about not just making decisions and then moving on from once the decision's made, but also looking back. And I think this is actually quite an important part of sort of a change practitioner's toolkit, is looking back at what happened and what you thought would happen, and then learning from that and then going again. And that is quite a scientific approach. Like that is experimentation in its sort of most basic form, but sort of hard maths, probably not. I think that probably more measurements should be included in, change programs for kind of really being able to articulate the value, right? So if you make a change in some way of a team's operating, and you have a way to measure the impact before and after, that's really credible, because if you can make a bet as to which way you want that number to go after the change, and then once you can see how close you got to it. So I think there's some really important work to be done around the measurement of change initiatives and progress, and using that to reinforce or to change direction for what you do next.
I think that'll be music to a lot of people's ears, hearing that you look at those measurements and KPIs. And I'm interested to know, so you've gone from project management into change management. Is there ever a confusion about which role is which?
I think very often there's a confusion. The most common one is, I hate that we use project management versus change management, like it's two things to be pitted one against another. A lot of the discussions I have with practitioners in both sides is about how do we enable projects to be more successful. So I some people might say that actually a change manager can't be a project manager, and a project manager can't be a change manager. And I think that's kind of quite limiting in the way we think about these things. Both project management and change management are a set of capabilities, of skills, right? And one person can have good knowledge in both and apply them in a small enough project where only one person would need to do all of those pieces of work. Or you could have really huge complex projects where you'd have someone really dedicated to looking at the specific activities under change management, under project management. And I think it does come down to, your own interest in that subject matter, which one kind of motivates you more. What does the project itself need? Like, how big is it? And then which of those different capabilities are you going to need in this specific project to kind of get the outcome you want? So I think the versus doesn't help. What I'm often talking about is how does a project manager, how does a change manager enable one another's work to be successful in projects? And I think that's probably a more healthy discussion to have around kind of change management and project management.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Ket. I think that a lot of people would be interested in your answer there. Appreciate it. I heard you talk about the impact that the pandemic has had on the attitude to change and the awareness of change. Could I ask you to talk about that a little bit?
I think the pandemic's been a really interesting ignition point for change management and people's awareness of what it is. So every organization has had to do some sort of change at quite a large scale, at an incredible pace, for their people, to try and protect them, but also to try and achieve the outcome. And everybody has recognized that is at the heart of what change management is trying to do. It's trying to balance delivery with the people that it impacts and still achieve the outcome. And so more people being aware about what change management is absolutely fantastic. It's what myself and other practitioners try and do. We try to advocate the use of good change management practice in projects, in organizations. I think one of the downsides is that because people just got on with it and they were in some ways forced to accept change, that speed and that scale doesn't require people to actually manage it or be involved in it. You can just do it and tell people. And I think what we have to recognize with the pandemic and change management is it was a set of ideal circumstances for change to happen rapidly. And what happens mostly in organizations is you don't have the ideal circumstances to push change through rapidly. What you have is often a very, very busy operational set of teams who are going to be impacted by change, 100% occupied by what they do every day, and a side group of people in a project trying to affect change on those people with no additional capacity. And that is a very different dynamic to what we had in the pandemic, where everyone was almost like, stop what you're doing. You've got to figure out how to make this work and get going again quickly. And everybody was in the same position. So I think this is where you've got to be really critical of what happened in terms of an analysis point of view, that the scenario in which it happened or the environment in which change happened was enabled by the fact that everybody had time to focus in on it. Whereas that doesn't happen in day to day. So it's great that the awareness has been raised, but I hope people recognise that the environment in which the change took place is very different to how change normally takes place in an organisation.
So what I'm hearing is that you're saying that the pandemic created this perfect storm, if you like. Everybody had one objective to get through. They were all in the same boat together, so we shouldn't really be expecting any other change projects to mirror that, because the circumstances are just not the same.
I think they can mirror it. It's just you have to create that environment. So one of the things I think with projects and organizations is organizations have huge portfolios of projects, which means they've got lots of people allocated to multiple things, which means there's only a tiny fraction of them focused in on one project. If you think of the response to the pandemic as a project, every single person had 100% of their time focused on trying to figure out how to succeed, and they had total alignment about what the goal was, which was to be able to operate again. What happens in most organizations is they have hundreds of projects, maybe handfuls of projects, but it's a more than probably most people can cope with. And there isn't total alignment about which one's the most important. So it causes a disconnect between what's asked of people and what's actually being done for them. And that's where it becomes really problematic. Change becomes quite sluggish in that environment because there's no set priority, and everyone's only got a tiny bit of their time allocated to multiple things. And that's the difference. I think the environment that was created was that everybody was aligned and committed and had the capacity to focus in on that one thing. And organizations can create that environment. It's just whether they choose to or not, or whether they carry on, running lots and lots of projects at the same time.
That's a fantastic answer. Thank you. And it leaves us much to think about. So it could be recreated, but it's not going to be easy. I'd like to bring us back to the change management training and certifications, if I may, Ket. I know you've been through both Foundation and Practitioner. Could you tell me a little bit about how they've helped you in what you do, and really the benefits of taking the training and certification?
Yeah, I think the certification's quite. It was quite poignant for me when I took it. I think I was describing earlier how I kind of had this epiphany of that there are other people doing this change management type role that I'd been doing, but not knowing it was called change management. And actually, that was when I found the certification around that time. I was like, okay, I've been doing these things that I think are helpful to help projects succeed. And then all of a sudden I found this sort of certification that said, hey, but here's the sort of evidence and structure and thinking that kind of goes alongside it. So it was really nice for me to go and study for a moment, as opposed to just doing practical things that I think would be helpful, and look at a collective amount of experience from lots of other people in one place and kind of dissect it, understand it, look at where I might have used things that are similar, be open to things that I've not even thought about. So that's why the Practitioner and the Foundation and Practitioner course were quite relevant. I mean, I did both at the same time, mainly because it was an extra 2 days, and I kind of felt like, I'm taking the time off already, and I'm immersing myself in it. So it felt like natural to do both bits at the same time. The training provider I knew that was delivering, I knew would bring a really bring in practical experience to it wouldn't just be theory. It wouldn't be just talking about how do you what is a stakeholder analysis map and here's an example, go and do one. It was actually saying that in the training that I undertook, okay, here's what one is, here's what one looks like, but here's how you might use it, and here's how I've used one in the past, and this is the outcome. That went from just not just theory in a book to practice in a live client example. That for me was exactly what I was hoping to get out of it, to kind of see a tool and to then see it be applied and then see the outcome. And so, also learning with peers who are also in that same position. So, there was about 6 or 7 of us on this course. It got to also show me that there were other people doing this job, because back then I just didn't know that there was this whole kind of community of practitioners doing a similar job to me. So I found it because it was at the right time where I wanted to mature my own understanding.
It's great to hear that you had such a good training experience, Ket. Really, really pleased to hear that. Not surprised, because we have a lot of accredited change management trainers out there, and it's exactly what we'd expect if they've gone through the rigorous assessment through APMG. You belong to the Change Management Institute, and I know you're very involved in the UK chapter. I'd love to hear how the Change Management Institute supports your development and what you do on a daily basis.
The Change Management Institute for me has been really crucial in kind of developing my skills. So I think, as I talked about just now, that the practitioner course is really great for kind of that foundation and really understanding some of the models and theories that underpin the profession. What I was more used to every day was the fact that I was actually out there delivering change, trying to intervene and make change more easier on people, and the theories were somehow a little bit like, okay, how do I take a theory and how do I apply it to a practice? So I found the Change Management Institute was just doing interesting talks at the time, and I put my kind of hand up to get more involved. And before I knew it, I kind of found that community I'd been missing. So when I first started out, I was probably the only person in my organisation thinking about kind of running projects with a sort of change angle to them, and I thought that there wasn't really other people doing it. I just thought there was project management, and then maybe some kind of extension of that I had in my head. But when I found the practitioners, when I did the practitioner course, I met other people. When I met other people, I realized there were more people doing this. And then I kind of searched around and I found the Change Management Institute. And that's sort of the thing for me that I continue to this day, 6 years on from taking the practitioner course. The thing that still sticks with me is I still have a really solid network of people who I can go to continue to talk about change delivery and experiences that I've yet to have that others have had and I can learn from, or that I've had that I can share with others. And that for me is one of the key things that we me as a volunteer, as part of that organization, hope to create, right? The space for people to talk about their experience. Because that's kind of how I've learned. I've learned by doing. Like the practice is great, learning all the models is great, but actually when you apply them for the first time in a real life situation and it doesn't go the way you expect, or you're not quite sure how it should land, and you might some advice from someone who's done it before, like where would you go for that? And that's where I think the Change Management Institute for me has been sort of pivotal in my own sort of evolving sort of career. I'll also say kind of like what I was quite keen on doing is I understood they do this sort of accreditation, which I kind of learned about as well, which felt like it was the next step up for me, which looks at kind of your practice. So those two things, the community aspect and also that continued professional development, just keeps your kind of mind fresh on change being kind of quite evolving in itself. So I found my work there has been, I've really enjoyed bringing speakers to the table as well, because I quite like kind of just looking at new ways of thinking about change. So I was given the opportunity to kind of run London for several years as a chapter, and we had some amazing speakers. We talk about neuroscience and Hilary Scarlett. We talk about design thinking with a guy called Lee Sankey, and like all of these topics are really important. They're just different ways of looking at change and how to make it more engaging, more accessible. And they really build your own toolkit as a practitioner, right? And I think that's really important. The more you want to wedge yourself to this as a profession.
Certainly, from the experience where I've been exposed to the change group from the UK, it's such a lovely, warm and friendly welcome, and that sounds so valuable. Gosh, if every time we got into a new role, we had those the sort of guiding hands of people that have already been there, done that, and people to learn from. And as you say, it doesn't matter how long you've been in the role, you've always got something to learn, right? And it's really, really good to hear that you've got that support. What we'll do is we'll include links to Change Management Institute in the description below. We'll put your LinkedIn address so people can contact you as well, Ket. Is there anything that you want to add before we close?
No, I think if people are hearing this and they're sort of mildly curious about what change management can do for them and their organisation, I think we're doing our job. I'm really keen to kind of help that mature people's understanding of it, take what's needed, to just bring their organization to that next level of kind of change capability. So, I'm on, as you said, share my LinkedIn profile. I'm on LinkedIn. I talk about change a lot. I'm always interested in people's views. I'm always open to kind of supporting others if they've got questions. And as I said, then, as a follow up to that, kind of check out the Change Management Institute. And just, connect and let's keep the conversation going. Anyone listening to this and wanting to find out more.
That's great. Ket, thank you so much for your time, your energy, enthusiasm and experience. It's really very much appreciated. I don't think it'll be long before we have you back again soon.
Cheers, Estelle. It's been a great pleasure being on here. So thanks for the offer.